A lot of people think that we only started to look into wind and solar energy recently because our fossil fuels are running out. But if you look at the actual historical receipts, that is not what happened. This idea that people spent the early 20th century sitting in dark rooms, shivering from the cold until big power companies came, is a very successful piece of corporate propaganda. We did not start with centralized fossil fuels and now we're trying to invent green energy. In the beginning, we had decentralized free electricity. Then, corporate monopolies, backed by government subsidies, spent decades dismantling it so that they could send you a monthly bill. The first wind turbine to generate electricity had actually been created in 1887 by James Blythe in Scotland. He offered the free surplus electricity to his neighbours and they declined because they thought it was the devil's work. I wonder where they got ideas like that. Let me take you back to 1922, Montana, USA. This is Joe and Marcellus Jacobs. These two brothers took the gears out of an old Model T and built a prototype wind turbine. It works, and by 1928 they have incorporated a company, Jacobs Wind Electricity Company. Between 1931 and 1956, the Jacobs brothers sold over $100 million worth of wind machinery to farms across the American Great Plains. The technology was very, very simple and highly durable. It was just 3 wooden blades. In a recent video, I was explaining to you how wind turbines in 2026 cannot be recycled because they are making them with carbon fiber in a resin, all petrochemical. You can do it with wood. 3 wooden blades that turn a simple generator that make direct current electricity. This electricity then ran down wires into a bank of glass lead-acid batteries sitting in the farmhouse cellar. The result was that the farmer had consistent, reliable, free electricity to power all lights, radios, and water pumps. They owned the system. They paid Jacobs Wind once to install it, and for the rest of their life the electricity was free. This system was so reliable that the explorer Richard E. Byrd took one to Antarctica. Meanwhile, in the American South, where it is incredibly sunny, in 1909 an inventor named William J. Bailey patented the day and night solar water heater. Bailey put copper pipes inside of a shallow glass-covered wooden box on the roof. The sun heated the water in the pipes, and because hot water rises, it naturally flowed up into an insulated storage tank. No pumps, no electricity, no fuel, no bill. By 1920, Bailey's company had installed over 5,000 solar water heaters across California. By 1941, over half the homes in Miami, Florida heated their water using the sun. These people were completely self-sufficient. They did not need a utility company. And that was exactly the problem. To understand how we ended up with a world where you are legally forced to pay massive corporate monopolies every month just to have light in your house, we have to go back to 1881 and introduce you to Samuel Insull. This man invented the modern utility monopoly. He started his career as Thomas Edison's secretary. He took over Edison's bookkeeping and consolidated his businesses into the corporate giant that would become General Electric. In 1892, he started running the Chicago Edison Company. At this time, the electricity business was a bit of a mess. You had dozens of tiny local companies laying their own overlapping wires down the same streets. Prices were high and service was terrible. And the citizens of these towns and cities were looking at this mess that these private corporations had created and were deciding to take matters into their own hands. They began to build their own public power to give residents non-profit electricity. To Insull, this was an existential nightmare. A publicly owned non-profit electricity provider would be the end of his private profit dreams. To stop the public taking over the electricity industry and running it as a non-for-profit, Insull changed his strategy. He stopped fighting government involvement and started actively demanding it. He began to give public speeches arguing that the government must regulate him. In his 1910 speech titled "The Obligations of Monopoly Must Be Accepted," Insull pushes a new concept, the term natural monopoly. The thing that had upset people was the mess of their streets that these private companies were making. Insull argued that instead of having multiple companies digging up the same street to lay competing copper wires, that the state should grant a single private company exclusive control. He argued that electricity should be regulated, not to limit monopolies, but to legalize them. And in exchange for this exclusive state-protected monopoly, the company would let a state commission approve its electricity rates. This was a hostile and manipulative capture of essential social infrastructure. By inviting the state to regulate him, Insull used the law to outlaw his competitors and prevent towns from building their own public power systems. And under this new state-regulated model, the government guaranteed private utility companies a reasonable return on investment. This was, and still is, a risk-free, state-enforced mechanism to extract money from a captive public who have no legal choice but to buy from the electricity company. And once his state-protected monopoly was locked in, Insull began to buy up everything in sight. And to do this, he pioneered the use of holding companies. A holding company is a paper company that exists only to buy and hold shares of other companies. Insull stacked these shell companies in 6-layer-deep pyramids. With just $27 million of his own cash, he controlled a highly leveraged $300 million empire that owned all of the local electricity companies, the gas lines, the interurban electric railroads. By 1930, Insull's empire controlled the lights and transit in 5,000 towns across 32 states. And he personally sat on the board of 85 different corporations. Then, in 1936, Franklin Roosevelt signed the Rural Electrification Act. The public story was beautiful. The federal government was going to bring light to the dark, isolated farms of rural America. But instead of giving loans or grants to farmers to buy their own wind turbines and batteries, the Rural Electrification Act gave massive low-interest loans to utility companies to build heavy centralized power lines connected to coal-fired power plants. The American historian David T. Bido points out that before the Rural Electrification Act, more than half of all farm homes in America already had their own independent, decentralized either wind or gas generator. Because of this, heavily subsidized, centralized grid lines flooded these rural areas. And because the government both paid for the infrastructure and subsidized the utility companies, to get these farms to abandon their independent energy, utility companies offered grid electricity at artificially low rates. The Jacobs brothers watched this happen. As the centralized grid rolled out across America and reached farm after farm across the Great Plains, the market for their turbines disappeared. Monthly utility bills were cheap enough because they were heavily subsidized by the federal government that it undercut the one-time upfront cost of installing a wind system. This was socialism, but not for the people who needed electricity. The state subsidized this transition from independent, sovereign, decentralized energy into what the pioneer of this chaotic brutality literally referred to himself as a natural monopoly. By 1956, there was no market left for small wind, and the Jacobs closed their factory. 25 years of commercially proven, distributed wind electricity just ended. Then, in the 1930s, massive amounts of gas were discovered in California, and the gas utility companies realized that if every home had a solar heater on the roof, their gas pipelines would be useless. So they systematically dismantled the solar industry. To do this, they had 3 strategies: predatory pricing, lobbying and building codes, and buying the competition. The Southern California Gas Company was one of the first to start conducting predatory pricing. They offered gas at artificially low, below-cost rates specifically to undercut solar water heaters. Then gas companies started to lobby and work with local governments to draft new building codes and zoning laws. These new laws made the installation of rooftop solar units incredibly complicated and expensive, effectively pricing solar out of the market. They also started to buy up all of the competition and all of the competition's patents. Remember William Bailey, who I told you about with his day and night solar heater company? Well, the gas companies took this company and forced it to pivot. Instead of making solar heaters, the company was transitioned to manufacturing gas-burning water heaters instead. Once all of the decentralized competitors were dead, the pricing trap snapped shut. The low prices disappeared, the regulations tightened, and the self-generation of electricity was made basically illegal. Once the centralized grid was the only option left, utility companies established legal monopolies. In every state and municipality, they passed laws making it illegal to build a residential home that was not connected to the grid. Even today, if you try to live completely off-grid using your own solar or wind energy, you can be fined and the state can condemn your house as uninhabitable. Even if you have solar panels today, most utility companies charge heavy grid connection fees, and they deliberately restrict how much power you can give back to the grid, ensuring that you can never truly escape the monthly bill. We did not build a fossil fuel grid because green technology was impossible. We built it because fossil fuels allow corporations to centralize energy production. Fossil fuel dependency is what allows these predators to charge humanity a monthly subscription just to live. We had the wind and we had the sun, and we traded them for a bill we can never stop paying.